So any questions from the last session before we get started? All right. Now, in the last session, I was just giving some introduction to Unix, how things work in that, and we were seeing from what are the type of files, and then we saw how do you traverse and what exactly do we mean by directory and files. Now, to continue, now there are certain things like permissions that we need to know. So, since we say that in Unix or Linux, it is a multi-user environment. So at the same point of time, many users will be connected to the same machine. So in that case, many people can access a similar file. So how is that you will ensure who should be able to access the file and who should not be able to access? Okay, so that is when there is something called as file permissions that comes into the picture. Okay, and when you are talking about a file permission, if you take a file or directory, generally, we'll be having three types of permissions that you can give to a file, or you can say what is that you're going to do on a file or a directory based on the access mode that you have. Okay, so when you're talking about the access mode, the default and the available access mode for a file or directory is read, write, or execute. So whatever that you're going to do for a file or a directory, this is what basically you'll be doing, any one of them. So if you are trying to create a new file or writing some content into a file or deleting, basically if you're modifying a file by doing something inside it or creating a new file or a deleting, then we generally call it as the write mode, which means that you are changing it, you are writing something inside it, which could be adding something or deleting or creating a new file. Okay, so that is what we call it as write mode. Next, you have one more mode called as read mode. So if you want to read a content of a file, so let's say you are not always interested to open a file, do some modification inside, but you are interested to just see what is the content and read the content. So in that case, if you want to do that, then there is a mode called as read mode. So only using this read mode, you will be able to read a file. Now, if you are either not reading or not writing, what else you can do? So if the file is a script or it is a program that you want to run, so anything that you want to execute should have a mode called as execute mode or a permission called execute. So only if you have the execute mode on a particular file, you will be able to run it. If not, you will not be able to run. So like this, you take any file, it will be among one of these or a combination of these three, using which we can do exactly some operation on that file. So if you want to read the content of the file, then you need a read access. And if you want to modify that, then you need write access. And basically, if it is some program or a executable or a script, and if you want to run it, then you need the execute permission. Okay, so these are the default access mode. And this can be represented by RWX. Okay, and additionally, R means read, W means write, X means execute. Okay, so this is the short form for representing the permissions. And there is a number related to it. Okay, what is this number? Why do we need? I'll tell it a little later. But for now, if you say read, it means 4. If you say write, it means 2. And if you say execute, it means 1. Okay, just remember this for a while. Now, so when you say that for a file, if you want to read, it should have read permission. Then if you want to write, you will have write permission. And if you want to run it, you need execute permission. Okay, so by giving these access modes, we can decide what a person can do on this file. So now let's say you will give the read access and the write access to a file. Okay, so that user can come and read the content or write something that is modified. But if you see, sometime back I was asking the same question, that it is not just one user who will be working, but many users. So how is that you are going to give who should be able to read and who should be able to write? Because let's say if I am creating a file, I am the owner. So I should be having permission for both read and write. And let's say someone else in my group or team wants to just read the file. They should not be able to write the file. In that case, how will you give the permission for that guy or someone else? And how will you give the permission for the person who is creating it? So that is when, along with this, there are three kinds of attributes or permissions using which you can define what exactly a person can do. So now, if you see, you will say read, write, execute for a particular person. So in that case, for any file or a directory, basically there will be three levels of permissions. So the first one is what we call it as owner. So basically, the person who first time creates the file will be the owner of the file or directory. But at any point of time, we can change that also. But file which has been created by a person will be the default owner. Then every user who gets created in Unix will be part of some group. So what in Unix they will do is, to give the permissions, they will not just keep the user ID. So if you want to log into a machine, you will have one user ID, right? So what they will do is, they will create something called as a group and put all a particular user to it. And then if you want to give a permission, you can give it to the group so that anyone who is part of the group will have the permission that you have given. So that is when the next permission that we have is group. So if you are owner of a file, or if you are associated to a group which is part of this file, then you will be allowed to have certain permissions. And now, if you're not part of the group or if you're not owner, then any user who is trying to access this file will be treated as others. Okay, so like this, the permissions, whatever, or the access mode, whatever we have, we can put it for three levels for each file. So which means now for every file that you create, you will have the access mode for these three entities or for these three levels of permission. So that is how for every file or directory in Unix, you will have a permission or the access mode called read, write, execute for owner, group, and others. So that is how you can decide who can do what in the Unix. So by default, for a owner, what and all permissions you want to give, you can set. And for the group that is associated with the file, you will give that. And suppose if a person who's trying to access is not a owner nor the group, then he will be treated as others. So you have to give a certain permission for that. So when you give now, you have to give a combination of all these three. So if you want to give permission for the owner, so what and all permission you want to give? So let's say owner means he should have everything. So he will give all the three together, read, write, execute. Now for the group. So let's say you are attaching the file to a group, because every file will have a owner and a group associated to it. And by default, if you create a file, it will be under your ownership or under your name. And if you are a member of any group, that group will be the default group assigned to this file. Okay, so the next thing that you will do is, for the group, what and all you want to do. So let's say for the group, you don't want to allow them to write anything, but they can read, and if needed, they can execute something because you are part of the group, so you have privilege. Now, let's say if you're not the member of the particular group or the owner, then what is that permission you should have? So you should not have permission to write or execute, but if you want, you can read, because by reading, you're not going to do any harm. So that is how you will give a permission for each one of them for every file. Okay, remember, it is a combination of these three values together. We will be telling what exactly a person who logs into the machine can access this file. Okay, so basically how this will be is, let me connect to a machine. Okay, now if you see, I have connected to a Unix machine, and in that I'm going to the default home directory. This is my home directory, and in that, if you see, there is a shell called bash which is default set. And now here, if you create a file, basically, okay, now let me create a file here called test. Okay, and if you want to see the details about a file, basically if you say ls will list all the files and directories in the current directory. Now here it just lists everything, but you don't know whether it is a directory or a file. So for that, you will say ls-l, which means long listing of the content. So what it will do is, it will give some additional information about what and all is the content in your current directory. So if you see here, it says these are the contents of your current directory, and what exactly, whether it is a directory or a file, how you can know. So you can see this, the very first section or the column gives you something called as permissions, whatever that we were talking. And in that, the very first value, if it is D, then it represents this is the directory. And in our case, if there is no D and hyphen, then it represents that this is a file. Okay, so let's understand this now. So you take the very first column, okay, of the ls-l output. In this first value, whatever that you see, will be representing whether it is a file or a folder. So now if it is hyphen, then it means it is a file. Okay, so for now you don't worry. Then after this, if you see, there will be 9 characters. So if you split into three, a set of 3, where the first permission represents the permission for the owner, the second permission represents the access for the group, and the third access represents the permission for the others. So that means now whoever is the owner for this file, if he comes and access the file, he can read and he can write this. Same thing, if you're not the owner, but if you are part of the group associated to it, then you will also have the read and write permission. But if you're neither the owner nor part of the group associated to this file, then you will be able to only read it. Okay, and in that, the third column that you see, the first column is this, second column you don't worry for now. The third column gives you the owner name. So this tells you the person who is owner for this file. So there is a ID called user who is the owner for this file. And the next one is the group. Okay, so the group associated to this file. So that is how you can give the access mode to a file based on this. So now if you see, every file will have a permission like this itself. Now let us explore this. So here if you see, you can split it up into 3, wherein ignore the first one, which represents that this is the file. So now for this file, who is the owner? User, and he is part of the group called user itself. So now the first three value represents what he can do. That is, if the owner is trying to access, then he will have read and write permission. But if you are a group associated to the user and you're trying to access, then you cannot do anything because there is no option. The same way, if you are not owner or not part of the group, then even in that case, you cannot do anything to the file. Okay, so like this, for every file or a directory, you'll be having three set of access mode. Okay, so this is how it decides what you have to do to a file and what you cannot do. Okay, so now how do you basically change some values? Let's say you want to change some access now. To change the access, how will you tell? So you cannot just tell only for one attribute. So you have to tell it for all the three as a set. Okay, because here you can see it is available as a set only. You cannot just say only for the owner. You have to set for everything. So to do that, we will use a command called chmod. Chmod means change the mode of access. And for that, you have to tell the set of all three permissions as you three. So you will first say permission for owner, and then continuously, just like how we are seeing. Then you will say permission for group, and then permission for others. So like this, you will give all the three together and whatever is the file name. Okay, so when you're giving, how will you give? So we will not be giving directly as what you are seeing, but we will be using some octal values, which is nothing but we will use these numbers when you want to represent. And when you want to represent, we will not be saying, for example, here, if you see this, what is it? 4, and then 2, and then hyphen, then 4, 2, hyphen, 4, hyphen. This is how it's supposed to be. But we will not be giving it in this way because you will sum up the number for a particular permission. So if you're giving the permission for owner, here it says read write, right? So what is read? 2. And what is write? I mean, what is read is 4. What is write is 2. So if you add these two, it will be 6. So instead of giving this, how you will be representing it as 6. In the same way, what is the value or the access given for the group? Again, 4 plus 2, that is 6. So once again, you will change this and put it as 6. And now for this, that is the others, there is only one R, which means it is 4. So you will simply say 644. Okay, so this is what you will be doing here. So if you say 664 and the file name, it will be having a permission like this. And suppose if you change it to 777, what will happen? What do you mean by 7? 7 means 4 plus 2 plus 1, that is 7. So what is the first value? First value represents the owner's permission. So it will be hyphen read write execute all the three. What is the next one? Next one is for the group. So you have given 7. How will you get 7 out of this? 4 plus 2 plus 1. So it is all the three. Same way, the last one is also for the what? Others. And for that also it is 7. So it will be a combination of all the three. Okay. So like this, you can set permission for a particular file or a directory. So here you see right now we have 664. So if I change it to first 666, and if I want, I can see only one file. So you can see it changed. Earlier it was RW RWR, but now it did the RW because the final 6 whatever that you gave is for the others, which represents read plus write. So like this, if you change anything here, let's say 754, how it will look? 7 means read, write, execute. 5 means what? 4 plus 1. So what is 4? Read. And there is no write, so it will be execute. This represents what? 5. And finally, for others, it is only read, which is 4. So it will be like this. Let's check that. So if you check, you can see it is exactly like what we have said. Okay, so this is how you will be setting up access mode or a permission to a file on who can access and who cannot access. Getting it? So in the same way, if you want to change the owner, then you will use a command called chown. For this, you will say chown, the new owner or the new user ID of the owner, followed by the file. So let's say you have this file, right? And the owner is user. So if you want to change that to some other ID or account, let's say root, then you will say chown root and the file name. Okay, so it says changing ownership of root to the test is not permitted. Why is it? Because you are trying to execute this, right? You are not trying to read this file, you are not trying to modify this file, but you are trying to run, and we do not have any permission that has been set. So that is why to do these kind of special things, you have to be as a root. So now if you change yourself as root, root has all the privilege by default. So if you go to the default directory and let's say chmod, the same thing, 754 and test, you can see it changed. You can see the difference. So this is how we can change the permission of a file, and if you want to change the owner, now I'll say chown root and let's say the file. So now if you see the file, the owner got changed to root. Earlier it was user and user, if you can see this. So earlier it was user, and now if you see the owner got changed to root. So now if you want to change the group also, you have one more command called chgroup, where if you tell the new group and a file, it will change. Okay, this is one way of changing. If not, while you run the chown, you can say the owner, new owner of the file, colon, the new group. So let's say I want to change this file from the user group to the root group. So now you see everything got changed. Suppose if you want to change it to something else, like let me put it back to user, then if you say user colon user, the first one is the owner, the second one is the group associated to it. You can see it changes back. So that is how, if you use chmod, you can change the permissions or the access mode of a file. And if you want to change the ownership of a file, then you will use the chown, wherein if you just give the name, it will change only the name. If you want to change the group also, directly you can say colon and the group. Okay, getting it?
Yes.
And let's say if you have a directory and you have many files and folders inside it, and if you want to recursively set everything, then you can just say chown or chmod -r and whatever, suppose, and if I say some particular folder name, so it will change everything inside it recursively until the end. So that if you have many things inside a folder and if you want to change everything in one shot, so you can simply say -r. So -r means recursively. Okay. So whatever that you have subfolders, everything will changed or will get changed inside it. Okay. Understanding what is it? On what is the ownership, what is the permission, and what are the three different types of access mode that we have. Okay, sorry, Kirti, what was that? I didn't hear that.
Yes, got it.
Okay, so uh, you should have got the same document. So it just has some, day-to-day activities and the commands that you need that will be helpful. So in this now, we saw majorly about how to use the ch mode, right? And then we saw cd, okay? And then we saw the command called ls. So what do you mean by ls? Ls will list all the files and directories in your current directory. And if you say -l, it will give you a long listing so that we can know who is the owner, who is the group. I mean, what is the group, what and all permissions we have, what is the size of this file, that is the next, that is one, two, three, four, fifth. Fifth column gives you the size of this file or directory, whatever you have, so that you can get. Suppose in some scenarios, you will be having a file called hidden file. Okay, so in that case, you will not be able to just see them using ls-l. So you have to use an option called -a, then it will show you all the hidden files. So now you see it is showing you so much of output, right? So what exactly is this? So in Unix, if you put a dot in front of a file or a folder, then it will become a hidden folder or a file. And by default, you cannot see that. But only if you use the -a option, you can see all the hidden files. Okay, so out of this, if you can see this, these are nothing but the login scripts which will get called whenever I connect to this machine. So yesterday I was telling, right? So that is the one that you can see here. Okay, so remember ls-a will give you all the list of hidden files also. Okay, and now, so to basically copy a file, you will use cp command, and for that you will use the source and the destination. So whenever you are using any command to access on something, it will always be the command. First is the source and second will be the destination. Okay, so for example, now if we want to copy this file called test into some other file, so then we will use a command called cp. So if I say cp, the source is test and the destination is, I'll say test2. So you can see it would have created the copy of the same file called test into another file called test2. Okay, that is how you can copy a file. Suppose if you want to move a file from one location to the other location, or to rename a file, even then you can use the move command. So again, for this, you will tell what is the source and then what is the destination. So I'll say rename this file from test to test1. You can see it will just rename that. Same thing, if I want to move this to some other folder, okay, for example, I am inside the user folder. Okay, so here let's take an example that okay, you have a folder called chef recipe. Okay, and if you want to see the content of that, you will just say ls of that. Either you can go inside or you can just say ls and the directory which it wants to show, so it will show. So right now there is no file called test1 inside it. Suppose if I want to move this file to there, so I will say source is test1 that is available in my current directory. You move this to chef recipe, and what is the name that you want to move? Okay, it is because, yeah, this directory is being created by the root and we are not part of the group. So when you say you are moving the file inside this directory, that means you are trying to write something inside the directory. That is why if we see here, it is not allowing. So we are neither the owner, we are not part of the group, then we are others. So for the others, we can just read the content, or if we have anything inside it, we can run. So that is why it is not allowing us to move the file. So let me create a new folder. So you can see that we would have got testing and we are the owner for this by default. So now inside the testing, you will not have anything because it is an empty one, right? So now if I say move test1 to testing, and inside that, if you want to give what is the name it should move, you can give. Suppose if you give to some other name, it will replace the file to a new name. Okay, so now you can see this file is not here and it will be available in the testing folder. Okay, so like this, you can move a file from one directory to other directory or rename the file. Okay, and if you want to delete a file, you will say rm. Whereas you want to delete a directory, then you will say rmdir. But rmdir will work only if the folder is empty. Okay, if it is not empty, then you have to first go inside the directory, delete the contents whatever you have, and then come out and delete. If not, you will use a option called rm. In that you will say -rf, which is recursively and forcibly remove whatever that you are going to do. So in this case, it will go inside testing, whatever that you have, it will delete, and then it will delete the testing folder itself. Okay, but remember, this is quite, tricky command. If you mistakenly give something else here, it will delete everything here. Okay, now whenever you are working on Unix, there are certain characters that will be useful. Now one among them, what you'll be using is star. So star represents everything. Okay, so suppose, let's say you want to list only certain value, then you will give that value. If not, if you say star, then it represents everything inside a file or a folder. That's what it means. So let me create a directory called testing. Okay, and let's go inside testing. We are inside testing. Now quickly, I'm going to create some files. Okay, so you have these files. Now if you want to delete, you can say rm a file. Okay, it will delete one. Now if I say rm and star, it means take everything from my current directory. That is what it means. So wherever you use star, it is going to take all values or all possible values for that scenario. So when you say rm, you are trying to give a file name, and basically if you don't specify which file, then it will be taking everything from the current directory. Okay, so like this you can use star at many places. Now If you see, if I say ls star, what is it doing? What is the difference between ls and ls star? So if I say ls star, from my current directory, recursively show everything whatever you have. That is what star means. So it is going down deep into each directory and it is showing everything, whereas ls means will just show. So here it says star means match everything. Okay, that is what star represents. Then how do you create a empty file? So if you want to create an empty file, then you will use a command called touch. So if I create a file by saying touch, you can see it will create a file, and this will be a dummy file and you will not have any content inside the file. Okay, so you will use touch to create a file, and whenever you create a file, there will be a owner and a group associated and a default permission given. Okay, and if you want to see the content of a file, then you will say cat and the file name. Okay, so right now you don't see an output because there is nothing inside it. So let's say I want to open this file. So in Unix, if you want to edit a file, you will use an editor called vim. Using that, you will go inside and type some content. Okay, so now you see I have how many lines? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 7 lines of content. And now if you come and say cat, it will give you all the lines that is available in the file. So cat means print all the content of the file in the screen. That is what we mean. And now suppose I don't want only all the content, but I want only certain lines of output. That is when you can use an option called head or tail. So basically, there is an option called head. For that, if you give a file name, it will print the first 10 lines of that file, whatever that you have set. Okay, so by default, it will give you the first 10 lines. But now, let's say if you're interested only on particular lines from the beginning, if I say hyphen some number, it will print only that many lines. So head means from the beginning of the file or from the top of the file, print only the number of lines that you are interested. By default, it will show the 10 lines. And if you say hyphen some number, it will show that many lines as an output. Okay. And if you want to do the reverse of that, that is, instead of printing from the beginning, if you want to print from the top, bottom, then you will use a command called tail. Tail will also do the same thing, wherein it will print 10 lines by default from the end. But if you want only certain lines, then again you can print using the hyphen, wherein you can say -1 means from the last, give me only one line, or give me the last line. That is what by means. That is the -1. So you will be using this a lot, wherein you can use it to get the output of a file. Sometimes if you run some command, you can also get the output of that. Okay, so how you will be doing that in Unix is you can run one command and then pass the output of that command to another command. Okay, so what do I mean by that? Now, if I say ls, it is going to give me what? All the files, right? Now, let's say I want to print only the first two lines. Then how will you get it? So in that case, I can say pipe. Pipe means just below your backspace button or just above the enter button, you will have a hyphen. Not exactly a hyphen, we call it as a pipe, just in the backward slash in the same button. So that is called as pipe. And for this, if I just say head, okay, see what it does. It gives you everything. And if I say -1, what is it doing? It is just giving only the 2 lines. If I say head-3, it gives me only the 3 lines of output from this. So like this, you can manipulate the output, whatever you're getting, using this option. We call it as pipe. Okay, so what Unix is doing is it is running this command, taking the output of this and passing it to this. So now here, head means I need a file name, but instead of the file name, I am reading the input from this command. So that is how it is running ls-l, and from that it is trying to print only the first 3 lines. The same thing you can say tail. Like this, you can pretty much play around with different commands and giving options. Okay. Okay. So we saw how did you create a file, move around a file. Okay. Now, one more thing that you will be pretty much using is grep. Okay. So what is grep? Suppose if you want to search for a content in a file, for example, now this is the file. Okay, so at any point of time, if you want to clear the screen and go back to the beginning, you will say clear. Okay, so if I type something, whatever, okay, your screen is full. Now, if you want to clear the screen, if you just say clear, it will wipe off all the output and it will start the cursor from the beginning. Okay, so now the content of the file is this. Suppose if you want to search for a pattern or a string inside this, say for example, if I say grep for 1 in this file. So you will say grep means search for a string that you have given. Again, it could be a string or a character in this file. And it will give us the complete output of the line where it is matching. So there is only one line which matches the string what you have given, that is this. Here, if you say h, so you can see that in this file, there are 2 lines which contains this. So it just doesn't print only the string, it will print the entire line. Okay, for example, let me open that and I'll just add something. Okay, so look at this. Hi there. Okay, so now if you do the same thing, you can see that it is saying you have a content which is matching there like this, or let me say there. You have 2h now. So now it says that their string is there in these 2 lines. So grep will basically give you all those lines which matches the string what you have given. Okay, so you can match a string, a word, or a sentence also. Suppose if I say, if I search for hi there, then there is only one match in this file which has hi there, because there is only one, because it is not matching anything else. Okay, so like this, it will print you the entire line matching the string what you have given. Okay, so that is what we call it as grep. Now, sometimes you might have to do the reverse of this. What do you mean by reverse? Now, I don't want the line which is matching the string. Give me all the lines which is not matching the screen. I mean, matching the string. So here, I want to print all the other lines which doesn't have this hello. So to do the reverse, you just use an option called -v. And you can see that it is not printing hello there, but other than that, it is printing everything. If I simply say h now, see what happens. So wherever there is a h reference, it leaves that and everything else it shows. Suppose if I say e, you can see e is available in all these three lines. That is why it is missing these lines, and only those lines which doesn't have that, it will show. Okay, so this is how you can search for a string and print the output using grep. Okay, and so at any point of time, if you want to print something on the screen, you will be using a command called echo. So if you say echo some value, whatever you say, it will be printing it on the screen. Okay, so whatever you do, it will be just printing. The same thing you can use to print the environment variable also. So that is why we were trying to get the value of the environment variable. Suppose if I want to know the machine name, there is an environment variable called host name that will give you the value. If you want to know who is the user as whom you are working, you can see this. Okay, so like this, there will be environment variables. If you want to get the value, you will say echo, and you can use the same echo for doing certain other things. For example, now let's say if I'm saying hello there, so what it does by default, it prints on the screen. Now in Unix, we use something called as redirection. Okay, so what do you mean by redirection is the output of one should be given as an output of others. So one of the example that we saw some time back is pipe, right? So generally pipe, what it will do, it will be redirecting the output of one command from the left hand side and give it to the right hand side. So if I say echo hello there, and now if I want to search, check if you have a string called there. So what it is doing now is it is not printing this, but it is printing the output, and from that you are trying to get the line, and since there is a line matching this, it is doing it. Suppose if I say something else here, test, you can see it doesn't put any output. That is because it is first running the echo, the output of that is given to the input of this, and here you are searching it, so that is why you are not getting any output. So this is one way of redirection. The other way of redirection is, let's say I don't want to run another command, but I want to store the output of a command. Then what you can do is you can use less than symbol, and if you give a file name after that, it will try to store the output of this command into that file. Okay, so watch this very carefully. Now I'm going to say a new file. Okay, so before this, do we have a file name new file? No. So when you run this and say, what it will do is it will create a new file, and inside that, if you see, you already have a content. How? Because this is what it is doing. So like this, if you want to redirect something into a file, you simply say greater than. But watch the same thing again. So if a file is not existing, then the greater than redirection will create a file and put the content. Now, once again, if I run the same command, okay, and I'm just using some other print or the echo statement. So now the file already exists, but if you open this file now, what is the content? Earlier it was hello there, now it became hello hi. Why? That is because what this single redirection or greater than do is, if you are redirecting to a file, every time it will try to create a new file. That is what it means. So if you already have a file, it will overwrite the existing content. That is why the first time it had something, so it was nothing or it was no file, so it created this file and put this content. But the next time, once again it you ran, it overwrote whatever the file content was there with this. So that is how it will be overwriting. But if you want not to overwrite but add to the existing, then you won't be saying one greater than, you will be saying two greater than, which means you append the value to this. Okay, so now if the file is already existing and it has a content, then it will try to append it. So now you can see there are two lines. So anytime if you have any command and if you want to append to an existing file, then say double greater than. Okay, so single greater than means overwrite, double greater than means append. Okay, and talking about all those things, so in Unix, everything that the operating system or the kernel will be handling is using process, right? So how do you know what and all are the process that is running? So to know that, you will use a command called ps. So when you say ps, it will give you all the processes which are being running on this machine as you. So who is running this command? As some user here, right? So the name of the person or the ID using which you have logged into this machine is user. So you can know this again by typing a command called who am I. So who am I means it will tell you as whom have you logged in to this machine. So it is saying that this is the user. So now as this user in this environment or in this shell, what and all are we running? Basically, if you see the shell, whatever that we are using now, that itself is a program or a process. So that is one process that is running. And other than that, just some time back, we ran this command because when you enter this, for executing this also, the shell will be creating a, or the kernel will be creating a process. So that is why you can see that there is only one process running. Okay, but if you want to see all the processes of all the other users also running in this, then you will say ps-ef, which means enumerated full form. So now just see the output. It gives you so many things. So what exactly is this? So now it is saying these are all the processes that is running in the machine. So if any other user is using it, it will also show, and what and all they are running, it will also show. Okay, and in that, to quickly see the output, the UID is nothing but the user ID. So it says root is the user who is running this some particular process, and this is the command that it is running. Okay, and for that, every process will have a process ID in terms of number through which the operating system or kernel will be recognizing it. So whenever you run some command and internally it will create a process, it will assign a number to it, and through that it will try to track what is happening. So in that case, if you can see, every process that you see here, each line that you see is a process, it will have a process ID. Okay, and now on the next thing, you have something called as PPID. So PID means process ID. PPID means parent process ID, which means this is a process. Now, to call this process, you should have had another process, because when you run the shell internally is nothing but a process again. So that is how, if you see, it will tell that the parent process which has invoked this process, I mean, you or the person root, he has first created or run this process, and then from this process he has triggered this process. So like that, you can see from that particular shell he has run everything. So like this, it will show what is the parent process from which the child has been triggered. So it will show all the details one after the other. Okay, so in our case, okay, now one example of grep we will see. Now if I say ps-ef, it was showing everything. Now if I want to see only the process which has been created by us, then I will say here $user. Okay, so you can see that these many things are being running by our name. Okay, so you can say ps-ef grep user, that is also the same. So it says that so many things are running in that. If you look, the bash whatever that we are running is having a process ID of this, and from this we have run this ps command. Okay, so you can see the parent process of this is 1721, that is nothing but the bash, and this process of ps, that whatever is giving us the output, has this. So like this you can know for each command what is the process, or you can find out whether some command is running or not, because internally everything will be a process. Okay, so there are plenty other commands and options in ps also, but pretty much try to work around with the basic command and try to see what is the output and what you will be getting. Okay, so that is what you will be doing. And finally, how do you connect to a machine? Okay, so from one machine to other machine, generally you will connect using, my goodness, so you will be using a command called ssh. Okay, through that you will be connecting from one machine to other machine. So the option for that is you will say ssh and the username or the user id using which you have to connect to a machine. Okay, so first thing you will say is the user id, and then at the rate the password for that, or you can simply ignore this and then just say what is the machine to which you want to connect. So if you say this way, it will try to connect to this machine, and when it is trying to connect this machine, it will be trying to connect as this user id, and later it will ask you the password. So what's wrong? Okay, let me try to connect to the same machine. Okay, I'm just showing you an example. So I'll say user. So you see, from whatever machine you are working, it is trying to connect to this machine as this user. Okay, then it will ask you the password. So you have to give the password of this user ID. Okay, so now it is logged in. So now you are logged into this machine as this user. Okay, so typically what I did is I connected to the same machine. That's it. Okay, so remember, you will be using this a lot. Sometimes you might use SSH, or sometimes you might also use something called as RSH, which is again going to be the same thing. So it is a different way of connecting, that is remote shell and secure shell. But widely you will be using SSH. In some cases you will be using RSH. Okay, so connecting from one machine to other machine, this is what you will be doing. Okay, um, pretty much this should be good enough for you to get started. Okay, and what else? Yeah, this should be good enough. So go to this sheet. There are a couple of other commands and you can play around with that. But what you need majorly is these commands only. Okay, this is not for any administration, but for your basic day-to-day activity. Getting it? Any questions or doubts so far?